Thank you. Okay. So let's get started. Like I said, good morning, good afternoon, good night, guys and girls. Welcome to the next webinar on the series for this BIM 360 hackathon. I hope you guys are doing pretty well with your applications. I can't wait to see them. So today it's the turn for the viewer. So I like to say it's probably the nicest thing on it because it's what actually we tend to visualize and see on our screen. It actually looks pretty cool. So my name is Jaime Rosales. You guys can find me on the internet as AfroJME. I used to have this big afro hair, so that's the reason the Twitter handle sticked. I don't have it anymore. I got married, so that's okay. And then I'm part of the Forge developer, the Forge partner development team, and I'm a Forge developer advocate. So before we get started, just to give you an idea of what it's going to be to ask questions. So we have two ways to do this. One of them is to raise a hand to speak, but I will ask you if you can wait for this until the end of the webinar. I will give you time and a chance to ask me questions directly. And then, but the other one that you can do, it's since I have a couple of people in my team in the webinar, you can type a question on it. And I see that I have already a question. And then hand raised. Okay, Aristides. Okay, so yeah, I guess you guys were able to figure that out, so that's good. So we're gonna get started. So first, I'm gonna take you to the agenda of what are we gonna be showing today. First will be just a simple comparison between 2D and 3D. Then a workflow of the viewer. Why did we actually decided to create this technology and what is the benefit for you guys in order to use it? Then a couple of AC viewer demos. So I have demos that uses access to MongoDB data, some VR demos, some IoT demos, and a couple of different interactions, also some D3 graphs interacting with the viewer itself in 2D and 3D. Then the one after will be code samples. I will point you out to where all the code that's available for you guys to take a look, grab, and then just customize in the best way possible for you guys to use. The other one will be documentation reference. So I'm gonna show you where to find documentation, how to get started, how to create toolbar buttons, how to create extensions, and so on. And last but not least, we will give you the chance to ask questions. Like I said, I have a couple of people in my team that can help me out with the written questions, but at the time also that we finish the webinar, we will give you the chance to speak up and then ask us anything that you need. Okay, so 2D versus 3D. So for this quick sample is just, I'm gonna be using a website that I found. It's called Pulte Homes. And basically, it's a website where you can visualize whenever you're buying this kind of apartment houses and all that, we have access to different information such as pictures, prices, information about the property itself, and also some like floor plan that we can visualize. And I have used this sample before, and I just recently noticed that they have something now that's called an interactive floor plan, and where you have a chance to, let's say, select one of the areas on the house and then decide if you want to have some kind of like seat and a shower and a tub, or just a shower and a seat and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, this doesn't give me too much to play around with. If I'm personally, if I'm buying, let's say, an apartment or a house, I would like to kind of see it differently. I would like to get just an idea of how this is gonna look. And I know that the floor plan actually does a lot for someone that it's buying, or also someone that design it, or just to decide on it. But if we have the technology in order to visualize this in some kind of different way, why not take advantage of that, right? So by just simply embedding the viewer directly on something that looks like the website of this Pulte Home, we have a way to start visualizing the inside, let's say, of the apartment, where we can see where the windows are going to be placed, what the color of the walls are going to be, what the outside of the house or the apartment is going to look. So the good thing about it is that you actually do not need any kind of plugin, any kind of software actually needed to be installed in order to be able to run in your website. This is using, well, as you know, the viewer that comes from the Forge platform. But the background of the viewer technology itself, it's using WebGL and 3JS, which we will talk a little bit more about it in just a second. So you have a chance to just visualize this house that you're about to buy from a different angle, and then just kind of get a better idea of what you're paying your money for. And I think your clients also can benefit from the use of something like this. Okay. So let me close this. So that was just a quick and simple comparison of the 2D and the 3D. So now the viewer workflow, and why did we decided to actually create the technology itself? So we know that when it comes to design, we have different kinds of design out there. The one that kind of makes more sense for us in this case will be interior designers, civil engineers, architects, and tools such as AutoCAD, Revit, Navisworks, SketchUp, and so on. They tend to get used in order to create these CAD models full of metadata and with this nice looking 3D designs on it. So the traditional workflow itself is that the designer or the architect makes up the design. It sends it over to a client, but then the client needs to figure out what kind of software he needs in order to visualize the file. And let's face it, sometimes if it's a very proprietary format itself, they will probably need to get the license for the software itself, like AutoCAD, Navisworks, Revit, SketchUp, and stuff like that. So this kind of creates some kind of problem, right? And as we know that there's some universal formats out there, such as STL and OBJs. OBJs, we can use them today with virtual reality. STLs, we can use them with 3D printers. But then at the same time, also there are some proprietary formats like Revit, DWGs from AutoCAD, SketchUp, and so on. Okay. So the problem itself is that the model, it becomes like extremely lossy. And what do I mean by lossy? So I like photography, and one example that I have found that it's kind of like self-explanatory when it comes to lossiness is that if you take a picture, let's say in a raw mode, and it's a big pixel size picture, and then let's say you open it in something like Paint, which unfortunately it's disappearing, or I think already disappeared, and then you have a certain size on this picture, you save it, and then you see the picture actually, it looks quite the same, but it reduces exponentially on the size of the picture. But if you try to print this picture into something that you want to hang in your wall and everything, the quality itself of the picture got lost. So this kind of became like extremely lossy itself. Then the other problem that basically we have more understanding with it, it's that we often lose the metadata. So the metadata that comes with the CAD model itself, such as quantity, width, height, and then information about the properties of the model itself, they get lost. And then we end up having the client saying, you know what, I do not have the software. Can you please render these images into a PDF? And then we transition from a 3D into a 2D. And let's face it, since we already have technology out there that can let us visualize the 3D itself in our web browser, why not use it? So we have technology called WebGL. So I know some of you might be familiar with WebGL, some other ones might not. Something that I can tell you is that it is a difficult technology to master. In order to create, let's say, a cube directly on the browser, it might take quite a couple of lines of like shader coding and all that in order to have just an interactive cube. Let's not say it will probably take a lot longer to have a full design of a building, being able to be interactive with it. But the good thing about WebGL itself is that even if it's not a W3C standard, we have every browser actually supporting it nowadays. So we have Chrome, Firefox, IE 11 Plus, Opera, Safari, iOS 8 Plus devices, and Android devices. They do support it, Edge as well. And then the other thing also is that we have another library. It's called 3JS. So if you're not familiar with 3JS, you guys can take a look at 3js.org, and you're gonna see different examples of the use of 3D on the web. One of them actually, it's A360, which is using the same viewer technology that Forge is using. So it's kind of like one of the future projects that it's using this 3JS library. So we have some examples here that, let's say, if you want to do like an interactive cube on it, you can kind of like move around, and then you see already that I didn't have any kind of plugin installed in order to visualize this 3D. But at the same time too, these are just color cubes, right? So to create something like I don't know, like a hospital building and all that, it might take quite a lot if you want to do it purely with code. But the good thing about it is that you actually don't need to do that, because we have taken care of that for you. So using the viewer within the Forge platform, okay? So now I'm gonna show you a couple of demos that I have in order to give you an idea of what you can do with the viewer itself. So we're gonna start with the first one, which is the viewer tutorial, and let me close this. Then follow by, actually, let's start with the headless viewer. So this headless viewer, basically, it's an interactive model itself loaded within a gallery. So in this case, we have Revit fabric here that we can have some kind of interaction, like zooming in order to see different parts of the model itself. And then as you see, I do not have the toolbar. If you guys have seen it before, I do not have the cube. That has been completely removed, but I do have my own logo in here. And the other thing is that since I do not have the toolbar, most of the interactions that I can do with this model come in from custom-made extensions that I have available in here. So we're gonna restate this model. And then we have a way to apply different functionalities directly to the model itself. Let's say like rotation, or like exploding the model into thousands of little pieces. So it's just to show you that the fact that you don't have the toolbar itself, it doesn't matter. We have a way to access that kind of functionality that the viewer allows you to do from a different kind of extension itself. We have access to properties itself, just simple properties. This model does not contain that much metadata, so it just gives you a label on the basic wall, I guess, and then different kinds of parts, another wall, some floors, and all that. So pretty simple. This is what we call a headless viewer. So just keep that in mind. So whenever I mention it later on, you already have an idea what the headless viewer is, which means does not have any of the UI that we provide you with the viewer, in case you want to do something like that. Okay. So let me close this, and then. So basically now this sample, it's actually hosted on GitHub. This is something that I tend to use quite a lot whenever I want to teach a group of people how to get started with the viewer. So I'm going to take you through the different functionality that the viewer has, as you are seeing right now. And the first one will be, I guess, just a zoom in, zoom out with your mouse. And what we're going to do is that we're going to set the current view as the home. Why am I doing that? Because since we have a small div that contains our viewer, in case I kind of lose the track of the model, I can always make it go back to the set view home that I did. Okay. So now we're going to start from the use of the toolbar. So the first one will be the orbit. So orbit basically just orbits in a specific pivot point around the screen. And then we have different options if we want to do like a free orbit, or we're going to do just the orbit within a specific axis. Okay. Then the one after will be the panning. So pan basically just pans the model around in one dimension. So it's not needed it's not going to keep orbiting like we were showing before. Okay. Zoom, basically self-explanatory, zoom in, zoom out, pretty much. And then we have first person. So this version that I'm using on the viewer, it's viewer version 2.16. Some tip that I can give you in order for you to kind of figure out what version of the viewer you're using will be to launch the console. And you can do a simple LMB viewer version, and it will give you back what viewer version you're actually using. So, and why am I mentioning that actually I'm using 2.16? Well, the first person view kind of got improved for version 2.16. So as you can see, we have the use as in with the keyword using WASD and Q and E keys to move, shift key to move faster, and then you can use the plus or minus keys to adjust the walking speed, and G to toggle with the viewer orientation drag mode. Okay, so basically we're gonna start like kind of like just moving inside of the model itself. I think if I click shift, I can do it quite faster. And then from the inside of the model itself, we can start getting that sense of the first person view. So I can turn again and then just visualize the inside of the house or the building from a different perspective. I can push Q to go up, E to go down, and then again, my keyword itself with the WSD, similar to how you guys used to play video games in the past. I don't know if you guys were big video games players, but I was. So that's what actually this reminds me to whenever we were walking around, like some kind of maps. Okay, so yeah, so the first person view itself, it got a lot improved. It's a lot simpler to navigate now. So I will probably invite you to take a look at it and play around with it. And now, in order to continue with our different kind of uses of the toolbar, I'm gonna head back home again. So this tends to be quite handy. I like this home functionality itself, because whenever you go out of the screen or very deep inside of the model, if you just wanna go back, this thing is your shortcut in order to do that, okay? The camera interactions, you have a way to fit to view. You have also the focal length. where you can change the focal length of the model itself. And then just also roll the model. Okay. And go back to original state. And then followed by that, we have something, it's called the section analysis, where we have the chance to add an XY plane, where we basically chop off the model from the x-axis, where we have a chance to increase or decrease based on the axis in order to visualize the model from a different perspective. Same thing for the y-axis. Z-axis, if you want to see from the top part. So you remember this is the part actually where we were walking around earlier. And the last one, that will be the section box, okay? Where you can predefine some kind of section box itself in order to focus more on a specific part of your model. Okay, so again, my home button. Measurements also comes available with the toolbar, where we can do a quick measure from point A to point B, where we have a chance to specify also the unit type that we want to display. I'm Hispanic, so I understand meters a lot better, but you guys can choose whatever you want. You can change the precision also on the measurement. Okay, and then it gives you also what's the delta X, delta Y, delta Z. This delta Y probably it's because I picked a point not in the same height than the other one that I picked. And then you can just basically restart it again. Okay. Followed by the explode. Well, explode, it's pretty simple. It's just breaking the model on it. This is kind of like one of those wow moments that people get to see. It's I think it's pretty cool. How useful can it be for I guess the AC industry itself? I don't know, unless you want to just break completely the model. The other thing about it also is the model browser, where we have access to all the metadata that it's included within the model, where you can visualize only the walls, only the windows, curtain panels, floors, all the furniture within the model. Right now, as you can see, we can see already like some kind of problem, which is the ghosting of the model completely doesn't let you see like all the parts that you're highlighting fully. But there is a function in the viewer where you can actually turn off the ghosting on it. So this can be fixed in case this is what you're trying to achieve. And at the same time, since you have access to all that metadata, you have access to properties of the model. When a wall that gets selected gives you back the basic wall and with the Revit ID itself, it gives you back the constraints category up to what constraint the wall gets up, in this case, the second floor, what kind of dimensions this wall has, and it just keeps going with all the other metadata that it's available within that wall. Same thing for the floors, same thing for the windows, or a fixed one in this case. I think I cannot select the window itself, but you kind of get the idea itself. Then the other thing is also there's like some settings available within the viewer that you guys can select. So in this case, I'm gonna move this guy here so that way we can see it better. And then you have a way to turn on and turn off the ground shadow. So as you can see right now, we have some kind of shadow here. We can turn it off. And then also we have ground reflection that can be turned on in order to make it look kind of like a glossy look, that it's being reflected with your model, in case this is something that you decide to display. And then also like some navigations. Let's say if you don't want to show that cube, you can get rid of it. You can make the view cube to act as a pivot, the zoom tool or the pivot. You can reverse the mouse zoom directions. And I think I should do this for me because I tend to kind of mix them up. The trackpad on the Mac, it kind of confuses me sometimes. But you kind of get the idea itself of what kind of settings you can set up in your viewer to do it like more custom made for yourself. Go back to here, and then the last one on the toolbar will be the full screen mode. I don't know if you guys can see the full screen mode, but basically it just cleans up everything in my screen, and it takes me to a full screen mode to visualize the model itself. Then the thing that I was mentioning before is that those are functionalities that come in with the toolbar that it's given to you, depending of what kind of viewer do you want to use. But at the same time, also, we have access to creating our own extensions in order to do different interactions with the viewer. So in this case, I have 5 buttons below here that have different interactions with the viewer. So we're going to start pretty simple. Let's say we want to change the background on the viewer. So we can, by basically just passing the values of RGB, we can predefine what's going to be the top color, what's going to be the bottom color of the viewer, and then just do kind of like a gradient down to the color itself. If you wanted to keep all blue, well, you just define the same color in both parts, and that will be it. So we can reset the background again, so it just goes back to the original state. But I kind of like it like this for now, just to give it a different color while we keep presenting. So the next one will be, these are a couple of JavaScript extensions that got created by one of my colleagues, and I will show you where you guys can find it later. So one of them will be the Markup 3D. So whenever we start the Markup 3D, we see that a new toolbar button gets added to it. So we can select it, and now we have some kind of tooltip following us on the orbit mouse in order to select what do we want to define in order to place a markup. So we select here, place it here, and then we have access to all the property information in order to define what kind of property we want to set on it. In this case, I'm going to choose the category. I'm going to leave the blind to state on and the occlusion on. And I will show you what that actually does. So now we have a category of a Revit wall. So if I place another one here, this is a Revit floor. So I'm going to press escape, and that way we get rid of this. So whenever I'm turning the model itself, if I go outside of the point of view where the wall got actually tagged with the markup, we see that we don't have that one anymore. The Revit floor itself continues in there because we're always seeing that Revit floor. So that markup is going to become available for us at the time that I have visibility again on the wall directly. So this extension, actually, I like it. It's pretty cool. And you guys can take a look at all the code in order to represent the same functionality in your samples. Okay, so this is the Markup 3D. Then Transform. So Transform has 2 different functionalities. In this case, we have the Translate and the Rotate tool. So the first is going to be the Translate. And let's say I select this piece here in the model, where I can translate to a different position the piece of the model itself, and then just leave it there. Okay, so we have a way to interact with translating the positions of every single part of the model, or we could do a model transformation. So let's say in case we have 2 or 3 or 4 models loaded, we can represent the different kind of movement for this models itself. And then the other one will be the rotation one. So whenever we select again this, we get the option to do a rotation on the piece selected. So in this case, we're gonna just fully rotate it. And this might have some use for you guys, but at the same time, it might not. But it's just for you to understand that you could do some kind of altering directly to the model. I have a customer once asking me, can I do a representation of an open and closed window? And I was like, yeah, actually you can. The only thing is that those kind of changes will have to be kind of like stored in your own side, right? So as you see now, the window kind of looks open. So there's way to interact with the model itself from the use of different extensions. And then the last one will be this control selector. So the control selector gives you access to a list of all the visible, viewable components that we have within the toolbar. So in this case, we have the orbit, the pan, the zoom, the first person, the roll. And let's say I want to start getting rid of some of them because I might not need all of them that I want. So let's say I want to get rid of also the Markup 3D, the transform tool, the full screen one, and then one more, let's say the pan in one. So now my toolbar looks a little bit more custom made for myself because I might only have interest on having the measurement, the add box, the explode model, and so on. Okay, so that's kind of like one of the main tutorials that I use in order to explain what's the functionality of the viewer, and from the point of being at the beginning state of what you can achieve with the use of the viewer itself. Okay, so let's continue with another sample. So this is another sample. This one I will say it's a little bit more advanced in the use of a different framework for the front end. This is using React.
So Jaime, let me interrupt. Yeah. There is a lot of questions on the panel regarding this last sample. Would you like to take a look?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. All right. Oh yeah, I see that. Okay. Does the viewer use WebGL 1 or 2? So the viewer currently it's using WebGL 1. WebGL 2, I believe it got recently released. So we're not up to that point yet. But yes, you can do access the WebGL code through the API itself. But I think maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, I think the 3JS one is the one that you can access. I don't know if the natively you can access the WebGL. I believe you can. And then, let's see, does the viewer support touchscreen? So yes, it does. You will probably have to do a little bit of more work just to support fully the touch screen. If you go to that sample that I showed before, the viewer-rocks, let me type it again. This viewer-rocks.autodesk.io, you can interact with it from your iPad or from your mobile device itself, and yeah, the touch screen itself, it's available from there. Okay. Is the markup 2D element? It would be cool if it is true to 3D. Okay, is the markup 2D element? I don't fully understand what you mean by this, Mustafa. If you can type again, just a little bit more explanation.
I think it's asking, is the markup 2D element? It's a 2D element, right? What you put it?
Yeah, well, yes and no in some way. It's kind of like working around the 3D scene of the viewer itself. We do have a markup that is a 2D element where you can do like some kind of box around selected element, and that one stays in 2D. But this one is the one that we are kind of like considering 3D itself. If later on, I guess you can tell me more about what will you be considering Markup 3D. We can talk about it, or we can wait at the end of the webinar. Yeah.
Yeah, can I add to that quickly? There is also confusion about markup and labels. I think the sample you're showing is actually a label. You cannot really edit the text on it. If you're working around markups, let's say you want to do a revision markup, for instance, there is a different API that is also available as part of Viewer. You don't actually need to implement extra features for that. You just use the built-in feature. But that's like a reviewing markups. The sample I'm showing is more something like a label, because you are adding labels using existing information on the model itself. So it's just a tiny difference on the naming.
Okay. Yeah, and I will show later on a blog post that actually Augusto wrote about the using of the markup extension. There's one more. Can I save the translation as a sequence and then replay as an animation? You can create animations. I will show that actually in some other kind of sample that I will show later on. So yeah, let me wait for me to show you that part, and then let me know if that actually fulfills your question or not.
Yes, Jaime, there is this our partner did IKEA furniture assemble sequence that might be okay.
Yeah. And then I think I saw one about the 3JS version, but I think somebody already replied to it.
Yeah, sorry, I sent that to everyone. It's like 71, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're still a little bit behind with the 3JS version, but it's something that's being worked on in order to improve the version itself. And then, can I add a markup as a 3D element so it changed its position with the model rotation? Huh, I don't know about that one.
So if he's talking about the built-in markup feature,
yeah.
That's actually an SVG 2D on top of it. So the point of a markup on the 3D is to position the viewer, the camera, on a specific angle, right? And then you put some arrows and cloud revision, etc. And then you can record the state on that point, and then restore the state and restore the markups. So in that sense, the markups are fixed on that view and are on 2D. The markups will not rotate with the model.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Augusto.
All right. Just adding to Augusto's comment about markups. Those markups currently are HTML elements, and that includes SVG. But you could make a 3JS object attached to that node point, and then you would have yourself 3D object space. It's certainly doable.
Well, thank you, Michael. Okay, all right, so I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna continue with this. So the one that I was mentioning before, it's this sample, which is a visual reports representation of for the AC industry. So basically, we have the screen split up in 4, where we have one of them as the 3D model. And since this is a Revit model, we do have access also to all the 2D Revit sheets. And the bottom viewer, it's actually representing this 2D Revit sheet, where we have an access to all the ones that are available within the model. There's also some kind of selection events that gets tracked. So whenever, if I select something on the 3D model, I do get it highlighted also on the 2D model. I added some functionality that if you select something on the 2D model, I get a highlight and a ghosted on the 3D model itself. Okay, so there is like really good interaction itself that we can create with a 3D and a 2D model itself. Then after that, on the right side, we can see two charts. These are D3 .js charts, and this pie chart that lets you visualize all the supply air, which is within the model itself, by just highlighting it at the time of click on the graph directly. It also shows you what's the return air on it, and the same thing for the bar chart. In the bar chart, where we're defining a different property, which in this case, it's going to be the category of the model itself, where we have access to Revit walls, Revit curtain panels, Revit furniture. Like I said before, in this one, I did apply that ghosting part. So in that way, you guys can visualize the furniture itself in a better way. And then the other thing about it is that this single page application allows you to do some kind of interaction by using a third-party library. It's called Reflex. So let's say if you want to focus only on the 2D model itself, or you want to visualize different kinds, such as main focus on the 2D model, you can resize the panel itself in order to only visualize the 2D model. But the same thing you can do if you want to visualize only the 3D model itself. Do a resize on it, and that's it. Okay? So keep in mind that connecting graphs to interact with the models, it's possible when using the Viewer API itself. Okay? So that's one. And then we're going to go to this Forge configurator. So this Forge configurator, it's a gallery of different samples. One that someone was asking about the different animations and scenes and all that we can see here. Oh, sorry, this is not the one that I wanted to show. I'm going to use the extension manager. I have access to that extension from here as well, so this is what I wanted to show. So on the right side, we have a list of all the extensions that are available to actually use with the current loaded 3D model. So let's say the configuration manager, where we can create a sequence called, let's say the sequence is going to be called 1, and then we're going to do 1 movement, which is going to be our first state. And then let's say I want to turn and see it from this side. I'm going to do a 2. Then I want to do a top look. This is going to be a 3. Different point of view, 4. And one last one. From the front, 5. Okay. So now we have 5 different set states that if we click play, starts on the first one, moves to the second one, and so on. And this is achieved by the use of this configuration manager extension. Okay. So it's going to keep looping around unless I turn off this part. So if I turn it off, it's going to finish on the last one, and that's it. And I can select also to go to different views if I want to get rid of one of them, and so on. Okay. So let's turn off this extension. And then again, from here, we have access again to the dual viewer in order to visualize all the 2D views that are available within this model. So let's say if I select one part of it, again, same thing, gets highlighted. If we want to access all the meta properties too, So everything that gets represented by this properties panel also gets represented here. The cool thing about it that this library allows us to do quite a lot of stuff directly, where we can also edit the kind of properties that we have. So we're gonna do it that it's gonna be 10. Oh no, it's gonna be 0.5. It's gonna be better. And then you can do edit, let's say on the ground floor if you want, and so on. You can also, if you want to have all these meta properties for this specific wall, you can download it as a JSON file or as a CSV file. So if we can download it as a JSON file, show in Finder, open with Sublime, and then we have access to all the meta properties for that selected wall in a JSON file itself. Okay. Let's get it snapped back. There we go. We're gonna get rid of the meta properties now. Another thing also, it's a screenshot manager. This is a functionality that is available inside of the viewer. You can just put up a specific view on it, type the kind of the amount of pixels that you want to take the screenshots with, take the screenshot, it gets loaded on it, save, download, and now you can open it up. Okay, so something pretty simple, but can be pretty handy at the same time. So we're gonna turn off this. A selection filter also, if you want to see only the walls, only the windows, curtain panels, and so on. So, and as you see, these are just extensions that are being loaded into this part of the site in order to have interactions directly with the viewer. Okay, so now let's go back again to this configurator. Another one also, that this one is actually quite nice. It's a representation of signal through a building. So basically, let's think of something that we need to represent in order to see where the signal gets stronger, where it gets weaker. It can be like cell phone reception, or it can be like a Wi-Fi router or something like that. So whenever we click on a specific source, it's going to be taking into consideration also the collision with the walls itself. Okay, so whenever I click on a different place, we can already see what parts of the building itself they're going to be a little bit weak when it comes to having good signal. There's a way to do a dynamic mode also, that without clicking I can just kind of move around, and this is using just 3JS on top of whatever of the floor itself of the building. So this is another representation of, like, you can access this part directly. This is not coming in originally with the viewer or the model itself. It's just a layer that is being put on top of it. You can show also the raycasting itself. Okay. And then change, I guess, the attenuation per meter of air, the attenuation per wall, or just the grid density itself. Let me just take a look quick at questions, because I see this thing keeps going up and up. Okay. Is it possible to execute Dynamo script on model and display result in the viewer? I believe it is possible. I've seen some other people before doing it. I don't believe we have a sample, unfortunately. So, but possible it is. I spent some time with a couple of guys in a hackathon in Germany, and they were able to do something similar to what you're asking. If we can also control the transition between the sequence, adding easing, for example, this will be awesome. I believe you can. It's just a matter of actually doing more states, I guess. similar to what you do with, I guess, whenever you're doing a cartoon, the most you do, the easiest and nicest the transition it's gonna be. When you edit meta property, is that something that gets saved back to the Forge model? So it does get saved on the, well, yes and no, I guess. It's not like, for example, this is a Revit model, it got converted to an SBF, you inject new properties into the model, you're not gonna get those back in the Revit model itself. Like, you will have to store it on your own side to keep doing the interaction directly from the viewer. But I will show you another sample after I finish with this one that it's reading information of the properties directly from a database, and you can alterate the values on it, and it keeps saved. And then it's the configuration sample available on GitHub. Yes, it is. I'll show you later on where you can find it. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna continue. Then the next one will be this IoT sample, and I will show you one simple IoT sample, and then I'm gonna show you another one that it's a little bit more advanced. Well, not a little bit, it's just more advanced, that our research team has been working on, and probably you guys, some of you guys have seen it already. So basically, again, we have the model itself. Let's say this is the model of a fabric, where we have a couple of nodes here blinking that get represented here by the different numbers, and these are sensors that are being placed through the model. So if we click on this one, we know that there is a sensor located in here, and you start seeing the visualization of the data coming in from the sensor, where you have access to the temperature, the acceleration, and also the lux value on the sensor itself. And you can flip through the sensors itself in order to start giving you the data that it's pertaining to that specific sensor. Unfortunately, I do not have my sensor with me right now, because other than that, I could show you live how would it be to run one of them. But I can point you out to where the socket server is in order to kind of try it yourself, okay? And then the other sample, pretty sure you guys seen it before. It's called Dasher 360. So this is a model from the, I always get this to Montreal office, I believe, or Toronto, one of those. And then Toronto, thank you. So I was right the second time, I guess. And then where you can visualize also all the sensors that have been included within the building itself. You have access again by just like hovering over what kind of data. Ooh, this is not liking me today. So the data itself, something probably that I need to log in or something like that in order to visualize this movement of the sensors. But the idea itself, it's very similar to the other one that I show you. You can see dashboards of different representations of the sensors, and at the same time also do like some kind of navigation where you have, again, access to the sensors. And then if we kind of like turn around, I guess, we're gonna get information again about what kind of sensors are being placed here. And I think if I turn on the sensor occlusion, it should get rid of a couple ones. Yeah, so this actually acts in a way that if sensor that it's a couple of rooms from here, it's still being displayed with the sensor occlusion, only shows you what your camera is available to see at the moment. So every sensor that is within this room, it's the only one that you can see. And if you want to check out this sample, I tell you, go to dasher360.com. They have also a demo how to use it, better than me, I guess. It's it's weird that it's asking me for login right now, but you should be okay to just test that out and check it out. Okay. Then what else? Let's see. Oh, this is just, I know it's not very AC industry, but it's just a representation of what you can do with the model itself. This is using a physics library. It's called ama.js. And basically works that whenever I run this, these are gonna hit this wall here of cubes, and it creates a representation of gravity of how the viewer itself kind of works. So if I do some translation, let's say on a specific cube, I can kind of like recreate the same functionality with gravity of hitting this cubes itself. So like I said, it's not very, it's not a CAD model or anything like that, but the main idea to represent this is that whatever you can do with 3JS, you can do with the viewer as well. And then the wall analyzer that we have here. So this is a sample that got created just to kind of do a geometry extraction of like per level, depending on the walls or the floors. So let's say if I want to focus on the walls, which are in the 4th level, it highlights all the walls that are part of the 4th level, where we can do an enable wireframing in order to get data points of the collisions with the walls in order to get that that data itself that we need for the geometry analysis. And you can also download the report .json on it. We can see also the floor, same thing with the enable wireframing. We can put up all the floors if we want. All the representation with the wireframing in there. Okay. And then, and this is the one that I mentioned to some of you before. This model, it's so the way that it's structured, the sample is that we have a model, a 3D model here. It's a Revit model again, and then we have a cost breakdown analysis on the right side, where we also have a pie chart, and then some cost breakdown based on price and percentage of the amount that the model contains. But at the same time here, we have a database that it's a Mongo database that it's being read from, and it contains different properties such as the material, the supplier, the price, and the currency. So if I select, let's say, everything that it's concrete on this, who's the supplier, what's the price per kilogram, and what's the currency. So let's say if I want to change the currency to euros, we'll see that this thing kind of gets increased, but at the same time, we're going to make it a little bit cheaper. So it's going to be 100 euros per kilogram. And since I changed that properties itself, we have a way to inject this directly on the properties. So if I change this again, let's say if I change it to 300, we're going to get an update on this, and also an update on the database part here that it's getting represented on the properties. Okay, but like I said, keep in mind that these properties, whenever you change them, it's not like they're gonna be stored back into the original model. It's gonna be stored in your own database. And if you wanna represent this kind of data directly on the viewer, you'll have to read it from your own side. Okay, so keep that in mind. What else do I have? Yeah, so the BR one, oh, I think I typed the wrong. I copied the wrong link, that's fine. So this BR one, it's just a simple project that I got worked during a hackathon. It's quite simple and a little bit old, but actually, well, actually the B2, it's the newer one. So if you guys have any kind of HTC Vive or Rift or any kind of like VR device, you guys can go into this site. the brrock.it/v2. And then if we start a session, let's say with a house, and if you guys want to try it, you guys can scan this QR code that I have in here with your mobile device in order to get the split screen viewer in your phone in order to get that kind of immersive virtual reality experience itself. So I'm gonna set again the current view. And then once you let's assume that some of you guys kind of like follow my suggestion and then you scan this. So whenever I start kind of moving inside of the house itself, you kind of get to see a similar way whatever I'm seeing, but in a virtual reality experience. Okay, so I can keep walking here. I'm gonna make it go down. Hopefully I'm not making you dizzy if you follow my lead. And then watch out because I'm gonna go back home. And then also if I do have like some kind of like section analysis, this gets represented as well on the session that you guys are part of. Okay. So for demos, I think that's it for me in regards to demos. Before I move to the viewer resources, I'm just gonna quickly check the questions again. What is the accuracy? The geometry is stored in Forge. I believe for parameters, it's rounded. I believe so too.
Can I add to that then?
Yes.
So the precision is the same as the original file. So let's say we have a Revit file. That will be the original precision of the file. I think on Revit it's like 6 decimal places. But when you move that to Forge, each property is exported with a specific precision number. So let's say you have an area. That area is exported as 2.15, but with a precision of 0 decimal places. Then the Forge property panel will show 2 instead of 2.15, right? So because it's rounding that value. There is a way to override that, but it's not like a really supported way. It's like overriding a built-in feature. I will send you a link of a suggestion of how to override that, but that's something that the engineering team is aware and they are working to improve that in the future. But as of now, you need to either work with the precision, with the default precision they have, or override some internal methods to show a different one. I'll send you a link on the questions panel.
Okay, thank you, Augusto. All right, so I saw another question, but I think it got answered about what kind of VR is being used, if it's web VR. So in this case, for that sample that I just showed you, it is web VR. But we have done like some other kind of samples also using Unity in order to create also AR experience using the HoloLens and all that. Okay, so now the viewer resources. So viewer resources, we're gonna start first with documentation. So documentation, as you probably heard from the past different webinars, you can head over to developer.autodesk.com. In there, we have access to the viewer one. And then in the viewer one, we have the terminology of how the viewer API it works. So basically, up to this point, which is what you do with the model derivative API, once you get back that URN of the translated file, you can render it in the viewer, okay? So extensions as well, there is some core extensions that are available within the viewer, like the viewing collaboration, so it provides that support for real-time collaboration with other clients. The first person one, which you have seen, hyperlink one, the Markups core, which is one of the ones that Augusto was mentioning before, and I'll show you a blog post where you can read more about it. And the measure one, the section, and so on. There's a couple of step-by-step tutorials. So there is access to a basic viewer where you can visualize the code in order to how to load for the first time a basic viewer itself. I would recommend go more with the basic application because I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be using extensions. So whenever you see the tutorials on the extension, it's before you begin in order to have like a solid starting point to use the viewing application, where you're going to be including your extension files, you're writing your extension code, loading the extension, adding the HTML buttons, the handlers, and then manual testing of the extension itself. And it can be something very simple the first time to just trigger like an alert message saying, oh, my extension is loaded, and then when you unload, oh, my extension is unloaded. There's a couple of other tutorials in here that you guys can take a look. Events also are tracked within the viewer. So there is on geometry load event. So whenever the entire geometry of the model gets loaded, you can trigger some kind of action if you want to. Selection event as well. Whenever something gets selected on the viewer, like you've been seeing on the previous demos, something gets triggered also directly from that event. So there is a couple of other ones that I will mention. Also a tutorial on how to add the toolbar button. So you can see and go through the use of adding a toolbar button in order to create different actions to interact with the viewer. And the headless viewer, which is the one that I mentioned in my first sample, in case you don't want to have anything of the toolbar being represented and you want to add, let's say, your own logo and stuff like that to the viewer instance. So the API reference itself, you have a couple of other things here that you can take a look, like the extensions, the file loader, the model. But one that you're going to be spending most of the time is the viewer 3D one. This is quite a long file. There's way to do viewer.apply camera, and then you pass in a couple of parameters, clear selection, create a view cube, display the view cube, explode, fit to view, and so on. But also, this is where you can find, sorry that I'm going a little bit fast, but like I said, it's quite a big file. So you guys can create like a quick search and then just type something that you're looking for, like, I don't know, get properties, and you will find something about getting properties. So the mention that I was going to do, it's going to be about the events, where you have the aggregate selection change event, something that gets triggered at the time of the object gets selected into like a multiple model context, a camera change event, an explode change event, whenever you load an extension, whenever you unload an extension, and it just keeps going. There's quite a couple of other very useful events in there that you guys can take a look at. Geometry loaded event, it's something that I found very beneficial, since sometimes you want to start doing some kind of interaction with the model, but your geometry is not fully loaded yet. So you start getting errors that, oh, this cannot be performed, and blah, blah, blah. And basically it's because not all the geometry of the model has been fully loaded yet. Okay. So let's get back to here, and then code repos. So I'm sure you guys heard about this repo. You're probably getting a lot of the stuff from here, but just another mention, github.com, Autodesk-Forge. In here, there's one, it's called library of viewer extensions. This is where I'm using the extensions for the other sample. There's a couple of step-by-step setups here that some of these extensions have been built using ES6 syntaxes. So you need to transpile it into using Webpack in order to be able to use it. So the step-by-step part, it's actually pretty self-explanatory. you can take a look at it and then just recreate those minifile files in order to include and ask your viewer to load the specific extension. If you want to do some kind of customization to it, you will probably have to like recreate the extension itself. And then also the Node.js tutorial that I mentioned, that I show you as one of the first samples. It's something that you guys can take a look at it as well. I have the Viewer React Express Headless Viewer, which is the one of the viewer rocks. There is a viewer navigation sample and so on. There is some AC. So AEC visual reports, which is the one that I show you with the split screen of like 4 screens. And then for the configurator, it's called Forge RCDV, that you guys can take a look at as well. But just be aware, this is quite a big and extensive sample. So I'm sure you can find where everything is in regards to the fader and all that stuff. But yeah, so just keep in mind that it's not very like self-explanatory, but it is a very powerful sample too. Let me see, just closing this. Blog post. So for the blog post, you can go to forge.autodesk.com/blog, but also you have a way to filter down all the API services, and let's say by just doing viewer, you can check out the one that I mentioned before that Augusto wrote, which is using the viewing markups core extension. Some information about the cookie authentication with the Viewer 2.16 version. Get bulk properties method, which I believe some of you in the webinar actually used that in the past after seeing this post. And also another good thing about this is that this is actually where we tend to release the viewer nodes. So whenever you want to be aware of what new version of the viewer it's coming, definitely take a look at the blog. For example, the latest release on the version, it's the 2.16, and you can see what actually changed on the API, what got removed, what got decoupled, and then also what new stuff got added. Like I mentioned, the first person walk experience, it got improved quite a lot. So now it has a different way of being used. The markup edit API, the view cube, the orthographic and perspective, different camera reflex on the cube, and so on. And also what got fixed during the new version. So some of you that were asking about like touch devices and all that, so there is like a fix for the iOS whenever you're rotating the phone and all that. Then the other thing is that, oh yeah, so the webinar recordings can be found in this blog, The Field of View. This is run by Mikako Harada. And as you can see, we have already the links that are being posted here about the different webinars that have happened. So right now I'm giving you the Viewer API one. So that's one of the reasons it's still not available. So at the time that we actually finish, give it a couple of hours, and then we'll get this this link ready for you guys to actually go and grab. Okay. So, and I will give you also the link for my slide deck, so in that way you guys have the links. And the last one is how to get help. So get help, I think it got probably explained in one of the previous webinars as well, but I want to do a main focus on the viewer. So basically we're using Stack Overflow as our primary support system. So whenever you want to search something in Stack Overflow, you can type the question here and select what kind of API you're referring to. So in this case will be the viewer. If we don't type anything and we just do a quick search on it, we can see that there is 218 posts already with the Autodesk Viewer tag. Okay, so you guys can take a look at previous questions that have happened in there. If not, also feel free to ask a question and we will get back to you as soon as we get it. Not as soon as we get it, but like within the first 24 hours. And let's see what else. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you and happy coding, guys. So now I'm gonna take a look at questions. Are there any .NET samples for connecting a database to the viewer? We have .NET samples. I don't believe we have one specifically to a database. Augusto, correct me if I'm wrong.
The closest is just to extract properties, like custom properties, not an actual database.
Yeah. And then, are there any plans to ship the viewer as a web component? I don't know the answer to that, so maybe someone in my team might know a little bit more. Michael, perhaps?
I'm not sure what you mean by web component. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's a web components spec that came around with Polymer, but it's not formalized. So I'm not really sure. To answer the question, you can, the viewer is quite modular as is. Yeah. It's similar to 3JS. It is arguably, you could say that is a web component, but yeah, not in a formal web component sense that Polymer defines.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can you add geometry to the viewer? From 3JS, I believe you can, but I don't know specifically what are you trying to add itself.
Yeah, you can add 3JS geometry. So if you have some OBJ file or anything that the 3JS JSON file, or you just simply want to create a parametric piece of geometry like a sphere or a torus, you can create that in 3JS and add that to the scene. It's straightforward. There's examples. We've got some sample code that shows you how to do that.
He's saying like replace the window in a wall. You might be able to. Just trying to think.
Yeah, so yeah, I can take that one. The window in a wall, if the side is the same, exactly the same, then you can add it. But if you are expecting like opening and things like that is also taken care of, then no.
Okay. So the specified in Polymer, actually, I have seen that you have made some progress some time before, but I think it was abandoned. So there was a couple of things with Polymer itself, because we had a sample that was built using Polymer as the component, but unfortunately, Polymer got kind of like stopped being supported directly on iOS devices, and that's one of the reasons actually we didn't continue with that. Okay. So I'm gonna open up, I guess, if you guys have more questions. Oh, Augusto, can you send us the work around for the rounded parameters as well? So that's for Augusto, I guess.
Yeah, we'll send a link again on the chat panel.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, where are the slide decks? Okay, yeah, let me.
It's still to come. Bill is posting to the
Okay.
slide.
And
Some site, yeah.
can we use function in viewer.impl? Are they safe and stable functions? Huh. Who wants to take this one?
So yeah, so everything on the viewer that is like a data structure, like implied is one of them, are not guaranteed to be maintained. So I mean, don't rely on those. We had some change on the past. Let's say one of the changes we had was on the object tree object. So whenever possible, use the method to access the information, not the attribute, not the data structure itself. If you need to use any data structure for any case, like in this case, the implied, be sure to use a specific version. So in the future, you don't have a problem of newer version being released and then your code stop working. But yeah, preferably use the methods to access the information on the viewer.
Okay, cool. Then you're welcome, Maroon. Any other questions? Going once. There we go. Why is that? Sometimes the dimension tool doesn't work. Probably.
Yeah, I think we need to get the specific example and need to.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that probably make sure that you're passing the model options correctly on the, because if they're missing, there's nothing to get analyzed in regards to measurements whenever you select something. So at the time that you do your viewer.load model, you pass in the SBF URL, but also you pass the model options, and there is some DB shared properties that needs to be passed on as well. I think I do have that in my sample for the basic viewer one. Where can I get more info on the boiler node project? What kind of info do you need? React Reflex. Okay. This is quite interesting. So it will be much of about, like, my suggestion will be try to, so the UI, I want to tease it out to reuse. So okay, so there is some boilers with Node.js, and there is also a React boiler in GitHub. In React boiler, it's what I'm using on the AEC visual reports that I show you. So I will suggest go to that one. And also, if you have questions specifically about that repo, the best thing to do will be to open up like an issue on GitHub, because that gets notified directly to the person that wrote it. Awesome. Okay, cool. Okay, any other question, guys? We're getting close to the end of the time, I believe. Going once, going twice. Less typing. All right, sold. Okay. Well, thank you very much again for listening in to the webinar. It was a pleasure for me to show you a little bit about the viewer. Hopefully you guys found this beneficial. You're welcome, Viola. And so yeah, please feel free to reach out through the Get Help information that I gave you, and I'll talk to you next time.